If a decorated admiral lunged across the firing line to stop her shot, and the only thing louder than his title was the sudden crack of bone, would you call it mutiny or mercy range? Cold, the RSO snaps and even the desert holds its breath. Zaria Ellington eases the 50 cal down. At her collar, EAG 731. ZE catches the light like a kept promise. Was the danger in her hands in the glass, or buried in the orders behind her? Stay, let the truth choose a side. Morning settles over Sage Flats in a hush that belongs to ranges and chapels. Zaria Ellington walks the firing line the way some people straighten a flag, careful, exact, unshowy. 20 candidates watch her hands, not her face. She watches their breathing, not their bravado. Safety first. Then rhythm, she says, and their shoulders drop a fraction, as if permission to breathe were an instruction they'd been waiting to hear. A laugh too light to be friendly skims the benches behind her. Charity shots in a teaching mood, someone murmurs, low enough to deny later, loud enough to bruise now. Zaria doesn't turn. Names can crowd a person the way wind crowds a target. Answer the wind, and you miss the shot. She kneels at the first mat, checks a bolt, nudges a toe off the line, and points with 2 fingers toward the berm. Where your muzzle rests is where your reputation rests, she says, and the line goes still. She unpockets a bottle cap, sets it on the deck, and smiles at the smallest thing in sight. Here's your quick lesson. At 100 yards, 1 minute of angle MOA is about an inch. Imagine this cap as your 1-inch circle. At 400 yards, that 1 inch becomes 4 inches. At 808 inches. Now the scope's clicks speak MOA or milliradians MRAD. MRAD moves in mils, 1/10 of a mil per click on many optics. Learn the language of your glass and you can move a shot without moving your pulse. Know your numbers and win becomes a suggestion, not a verdict. She lets the cap spin once on her palm and pockets it again. You're not here to impress steel, she tells them. You're here to respect it. The youngest candidate, Ruiz, with the careful hands, nods so eagerly, she almost tells him to save some agreement for later when agreement is harder. The heat is honest today. Mirage shivers over the desert like breath on glass. Distant silhouettes wag in the shimmer. Zaria angles each student a hair left or right to keep a safe lane. She does not mention that she prefers days like this, days when the world admits it can bend, and your job is to adjust without complaint. She does not mention that the evenings are better, that in the dark with no eyes on her back, her hands remember everything they used to know. On her chain beneath the blouse, a coin rests against skin that still wakes to old alarms. Her father's. USN on one side, a scuffed eagle on the other, and across the rim a hand-scratched line that isn't regulation at all. Keep your rhythm. He used to say it the way other fathers say be careful, as if rhythm were a kind of armor issued before courage. She had tucked the coin away during rehab when every kindness felt like a dare. Today she wears it like a metronome. Positions she calls and 20 bodies flow to the mats. She walks the line again, not to find fault but to remove it. A sling too tight, a cheek welled, a breath too high, elbows searching for a ground they haven't earned yet. She offers corrections the way a good usher offers a seat, with the assumption you were meant to be here all along. The second laugh lands softer, embarrassed at itself. Zaria lets it pass. There is a kind of prejudice that shouts and a kind that smiles while it rearranges you. She has learned to spend ammunition only on the first. The rest she answers with competence until it runs out of places to hide. On my mark, she says. Not before, not after. The line holds. She glances toward the admin building and sees nothing but glass. Still, something in her skin reads attention, like a weight set quietly on the back of a chair. She shifts her stance a fraction as if to make room for it. Ruiz raises a hand, then lowers it, then raises it again. Ma'am, how do you know when you're ready to take the shot? When you no longer need the shot to tell you who you are, she says. And the answer surprises them by not being about targets at all. She pockets her stopwatch and hears the small click of metal against coin. The sound carries her backward to a different range, a different wind, a different version of her name. She exhales. Mark. 20 rifles lift like a single idea. There are 3 things she did not tell anyone that day. By noon, the rumor was no longer a rumor. The duty log carried it in official ink. Rear Admiral Sterling Vance would observe a 50 caliber precision demonstration at Sage Flats with visiting dignitaries on the viewing stand and a camera crew to capture best practices. A breeze moved across the range like a thought someone hadn't decided to say aloud. Zaria read the memo twice, then folded it once and slid it under the coin at her collarbone, as if weight could keep words from shifting. Commander Delaney Pike arrived with the smile he used for press days, square practiced looking grateful for everyone else's effort. "We need a clean show," he said, as though cleanliness were the same as safety. "Tighten the pacing, trim the dead air, get to the 6 impacts quickly. The Admiral's schedule is compressed." His hands made small scissors in the air. "We'll streamline the prelims." Zaria's eyes moved to the RSO board, where cold and hot were not decoration, but law. "Streamline what, sir?" "Redundancies," Pike said, with the confidence of a man who had never met a redundancy that saved him. "We'll fold certain checks into the brief. Optics have been pre-cleared anyway. I had supply issue a spare for your Barrett freshly serviced." He lifted a hard case like a gift and set it tenderly on steel. RSO Jefferson said nothing, which was not the same as agreement. Zaria unlatched the case and found the glass nestled in foam bright as new money. A paper label hugged the turret. "Okay, 2 letters in block. Print the ink, a touch too glossy. The alignment, a touch too proud. The font wasn't the base standard. The corner wasn't clipped the way Jefferson clipped it. Small things. Small things had a way of growing teeth." "Tomorrow at 0900, Pike continued. "Let's make the Navy look like the Navy." Zaria nodded. The desert nodded back with heat. She turned the optic slowly until the light stopped lying, then glanced at Jefferson. He held her gaze for exactly 1 heartbeat longer than custom required. Sometimes the call is not a trumpet. Sometimes it is a sticker that says okay when it has no right to. Afternoons on the range draw an audience even when no one speaks. A window darkens in the admin building. A pair of silhouettes pause along the fence. Candidates line up 2 deep, all of them pretending not to stare. Under that attention, the skin of the world tightens. Zaria feels it first in her fingertips, an uninvited tremor, small as a moth landing and lifting on the trigger guard. Mam Ensign Ruiz keeps his voice gentle, the way people speak around a sleeping child. "Do you want me to clear the line?" "No," she says, and the word costs more than it should. Eyes forward. She mounts the rifle and the desert narrows to reticle and shimmer. A breath goes in, but it forgets the way out. The shot breaks ragged. Steel stays quiet. Somewhere behind her, a throat clears polite and wounding. She safeties the weapon and lifts her face, not to defend, not to explain, only to practice the old discipline of meeting a moment without asking it to be kinder. After the line is cold, Ruiz falls in beside her on the walk back. "They don't know," he says, "what it's like when everybody decides before you do." She thinks of the coin against her collarbone, a private weight. "They will," she says, and hopes the promise is not a lie. Dr. Evelyn Park's office smells like coffee and antiseptic, a combination that suggests both comfort and consequence. Park turns Zaria's left hand in her own presses along tendons that have already told the story to other doctors. Grip strength is excellent. Range of motion normal. Reflexes normal. She taps the chart. "Your hand is healed, Lieutenant Commander. Your audience is not." Zaria lets out a breath that sounds like a laugh and isn't. "I don't shake at night. I don't shake when it's just me and the glass." "That's the point," Park says. "Your body learned to survive being watched. It remembers after the danger is gone. Performance under eyes. Not vanity biology. We can work with biology." Park draws a square on a notepad and writes a number on each side. 4, 4, 4. The drill isn't magic, it's a metronome. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. Repeat until your pulse loses interest in the crowd. Pair it with a cue that belongs only to you. A word, a picture, a memory. When the stare arrives, you go to the square. Zaria studies the square like a map. "My father used to say, keep your rhythm." He said it the way other men say, be careful, then borrow his voice, Park answers. Carry it where the noise can't reach. Outside, the wind writes shadows across the asphalt. Zaria stands to go. She reaches for the door, then stops as if her hand has remembered there is one more thing to lift. Back in the locker room, she untucks her blouse and turns enough to see the curve of ink at her shoulder blade, an eagle's head austere and watchful. Beneath it, the code that fits under a thumbnail and somehow holds more space than the room EAG 731ZE. She traces the air near it not touching, and the motion slows her heart to something like a steady drum. If I fail again today, then what she whispers not to the walls and not quite to herself, but to the part of her that has to answer before the range ever does. Barso Miles Jefferson doesn't raise his voice. He lowers the room. You don't need to be fearless, he tells the class at lineup. You need to be predictable. He holds up a laminated card that has seen more sun than some careers. 3 primary commands, 2 emergency calls. We do this until it's boring because boredom keeps people living. He points with the card, not the muzzle. Primary 1, cold range. Actions: open mags out chambers, check muzzles down or up per lane policy. Primary 2, hot range. Eyes and ears on clear lanes, commands from RSO only. Primary 3, cease fire. Finger straight safeties on step back from the line, await further instruction. He pauses, then lays the other 2 on the wood, like a pair of aces. Emergency 1, emergency ceasefire. Anyone can call it. If you see what I can't, you own the air with your voice. Emergency 2, stand fast, do not move. If I say it, you freeze. We'll come to you. The safest shooter in the world can still trip over a hot case on the deck. He turns to Zaria. SOP isn't a suggestion, Lieutenant Commander. It's the only part of you that doesn't panic. His gaze folds in the whole line. A pretty performance is what you give cameras. Procedure is what you give the people who want to go home. He proves it with a memory none of them saw. 2 summers ago, a guest leaned past the firing line to get a better shot with his phone. The shooter never saw him. We were hot, wind was loud. I called ceasefire and then stand fast when he stumbled. No drama, no shouting, just the script. We cleared it in 30 seconds. That 30 seconds bought him 30 more years. Zaria watches his hands. They speak in habits, the way he keeps his fingers out of triggers. He isn't touching the way he audits angles without making anyone feel audited. She hears Dr. Parks square in the back of her breath, 4, 4, 4, and pairs it with Jefferson's cadence. Rhythm meets rule, heart meets card. He sets a hard case on the bench. The spare optic rests inside like a coin in velvet. The turret wears a tiny paper badge, okay. New ink, glossy, the corner uncut. Jefferson doesn't frown, he notices. Labels, he says, almost conversational, are the easiest things to counterfeit. Performance is harder. Pike drifts by with a TV smile and a schedule. We'll move efficiently tomorrow, he says, meaning quickly. Jefferson nods once, meaning safely. Zaria lifts the optic and turns it to the light until reflection stops telling stories. The room has quieted to the soft talk of steel and cloth. A single signature on that OK label will decide everything. Sage Flats at night trades heat for whisper. The wind shifts and seams north to west-west to nothing, then returns with the dry rattle of mesquite. Zaria settles behind the Barrett as if lowering herself into remembered water. 4 counts in 4 held 4 out. At 400 meters, the steel looks honest. The reticle steadies. The first ping arrives like a small permission. She holds the second breath a heartbeat longer and walks the round to 600. Another ping closer to center. The wind tilts again, thin quartering, and she adds the click she learned from days when no one cheered. 800 waits in the dark, like an old argument. She answers it clean. Ruiz works the spotting scope without commentary, learning discipline from silence. When Zaria slips the sling, her blouse lifts a fraction, and a curve of ink surfaces at her shoulder blade, an eagle's head, and the short run of letters that refuse to explain themselves, EAG 7319ZE. What does it mean, Ma'am? Ruiz asks, careful, as if a question could spook the night. A reminder, she says, fitting the sling again. For when reminders matter, she does not add whose voice or which day. Some things earn their story by staying quiet longer. They reset targets, police brass, and log the win. Jefferson signs off the lane with a nod that weighs the same as approval here. On the walk back, the range lights buzz like tired bees. Zaria touches the coin through cloth and feels the pulse answer. The glass felt right tonight. The shots felt like themselves. But morning has a way of adding eyes. Somewhere between the benches and the door, a plan is already deciding whether procedure will be shortened to look efficient or held so everyone gets to go home. Morning brings a schedule that has been improved. Commander Pike posts the update like a victory banner, The demo is moved up the prelim briefs, compress the optics, checks folded into a single line on a clipboard. We keep momentum, he says, voice bright as a recruiting video. No dead air. On the range board, cold and hot sit where they always have, unmoved by punctuation. Zaria reads the sheet, then looks to RSO Jefferson. He doesn't argue in front of a crowd. He just places the laminated card in his breast pocket as if to say, when the time comes, the card will speak. Rear Admiral Sterling Vance arrives without trumpets, just a sedan, a shadow and a posture that reads attentive rather than grand. He greets the RSO first. He walks the lanes like a man checking pews before a memorial, angles backstops berm integrity, the small habits that prove a place remembers its purpose. When he reaches the line, his right hand pauses on the bench. There's a tremor small as a wire in wind. He does not hide it. He does not explain it. Proceed, he says, and his tone leaves no room for hurry. Pike all smile claps once. We'll run the underwatch drill. Build confidence. He waves the candidates into a shallow half circle behind Zaria. Eyes on the shooter. Quiet. Let's make the Navy look like the Navy. Zaria lowers herself behind the Barrett. The weight feels honest. The air does not. Being watched by 20 people changes the temperature of a moment. The reticle floats thin as a cough. She draws a breath, but it stays with her. She releases the shot early as if to get the moment out of her hands. The round goes wide. Steel keeps its counsel. Behind her, no one laughs. The silence is thick enough to bruise. Cease fire. Jefferson calls calm as rain. Reset. No judgment, no lecture, just the script. Zaria closes her eyes and the square Dr. Park drew yesterday rises like a window, 4 and 4 held 4 out. She borrows her father's voice. Keep your rhythm and lets her shoulders fall a fraction. The world takes one step back as if given permission. Hot range, Jefferson says. Zaria finds the reticle, and this time doesn't ask the shot to make her case. She breathes the way a metronome breathes. The ping at 400 arrives true and unshowy. She walks to 600. Ping. She ignores the pressure to hurry, which is the same as refusing a dare. She chooses center at 800 and puts the round where patience points. Ping. Better, Pike says, as if he owns the word. Vance says nothing. Jefferson's pencil, however, scratches a note on his clipboard. Breathing regained 4 to 4-4. When the line is safe, Zaria gathers the candidates and points them not at the target, but at the air between here and there. Your glass is honest, she says, but the air can lie. She lifts a hand to the heat quivering above the sand. This shimmer is mirage heat lifting air, so the light bends. When the waves tilt left to right, the wind is pushing right. Right to left, it's pushing left. The steeper the angle of those waves, the stronger the wind. That tells you whether it's full value blowing across your bullet's path at 90 degrees or half value coming in at 45 doing half the work. At 400 meters, full value wind might push you inches. At 800, it's hand-sized. Don't fight it. Read it, then meet it halfway. She lets them look until they nod as if they see it too. Ruiz is the first to speak. So the air is a translator, he says. We just learned the language. Exactly, Zaria answers. And languages take practice. Pike checks his watch. We'll skip the second mirage block this morning, he announces lightly. We've got an admiral to impress. Jefferson's eyes flick to Zaria's, then to the optic case on the bench. The spare glass lies there patient as a coin. He doesn't touch it. He doesn't have to. The paper badge on its turret catches a band of sun, OK ink, glossy, as if it were still drying. The corner sits square, where this range's labels are always clipped at a bias. Small things. Small things grow teeth when you ignore them. They run another pass. Vance steps out of the sun and into the shadow of the canopy, watching angles more than people. He studies the backstops, then the line of bodies, then the way steel answers and does not answer. When the shooter's clear and the range is cold, he walks to the bench where the spare optic waits. He lifts it with the care you give a fragile gift, not because it is precious, but because it can be dangerous. He turns it once, twice, and holds the turret to his eye the way a jeweler reads a stone. The tremor in his fingers makes the light blink. Pike moves in as if to narrate. Vance does not hand him the optic. He does not speak. He sets the glass down, gently covers the label with his palm for a heartbeat, then lets it go. His gaze crosses to Zaria, and stops there, not unkind, just measuring a distance. No one asks the question aloud. The desert asks it for them. What is he thinking? The final review arrives dressed like ceremony and weighted like weather. Tripods settle their 3 small feet into the dust. A boom mic leans over the canopy like a curious bird. Someone from public affairs tapes down cables as if neat lines could promise neat outcomes. Commander Pike moves among them with practiced hospitality, shaking hands, pointing at horizons, his smile rehearsed to the millimeter. Here's the ask, he tells Zaria, voice pitched for cordial agreement. Camera angles are tight. If we trim a few steps, we save minutes and look sharper on tape. Combine the optics confirmation with the safety brief roll, right to the 6 impacts. The Admiral's window is narrow. RSO Jefferson stands half a pace behind Zaria, quiet as a guardrail. He does not contradict. He simply exists in a way that makes contradiction unnecessary. Zaria watches a tech mark the firing line with glow tape and answers without raising her tone. Procedure is never boring. Pike laughs lightly because lightness costs less than consent. Of course, we're not skipping safety, just streamlining. You know how these things play. She looks down at the laminated card in Jefferson's hand. The edges are frayed from pocketing and weather. The print is clean, cold range, hot range, ceasefire. 2 emergency calls that have nothing to do with looking sharp and everything to do with going home. I know how they play, she says. And I know where they end when a step goes missing. He takes the hint, or pretends to. We'll find a balance. On the bench, the spare optic rests in its velvet cutout like a jewel meant for a wrong occasion. The turret still wears its paper badge OK ink, glossy enough to catch the lens of the nearest camera. Zaria turns it in her hands until the glare dies. The corner of the label sits square where this range's corners are always clipped at an angle. Small things. Small things can turn busy days into bad history. Admiral Vance walks the perimeter without an entourage, making notes in a pocketbook that was old before today. He checks berm faces with a look that measures slumps and shadows. When he steps beneath the canopy, his right hand pauses on the table's edge. The tremor is there, a filament caught in its own current. He covers the OK badge with his palm for a moment, then lifts his hand and says only, "Carry on." The schedule says 0900 tomorrow. The sky says a front will push through in the night. The desert says it has seen worse certainty than this. In the quiet before the gear is cased, Zaria opens her locker and the small envelope inside. The paper knows her touch. It has been unfolded and refolded enough times to remember. She reads the first line, and no more, because first lines are all some days can hold. Keep your rhythm, Z. Don't let the crowd borrow your hands. She folds the letter twice and slips it under the coin, close enough that metal and ink can keep each other honest. Ruiz appears in the doorway and waits until waiting has done its good work. "Ma'am," he says, "do you ever wish the important days were smaller?" "They are," she answers. "They just don't look that way when other people are watching." He nods, the kind of nod that keeps a young officer from overflowing his boots. He will spot tomorrow. He will call wind and misses with the tact of a man who understands that truth is a service, not a performance. Zaria wants to tell him more about small steps and large consequences, about labels and fonts and corners cut. But the better lesson is the one a person discovers with their own good eyes and a quiet heart. Jefferson clicks his pen closed. "We brief at 0830, he says. "We run the card, full and clean." Pike smiles the way schedules smile, and we hit 6 for 6 before the Admiral hits his next appointment. Outside, the light lowers itself over sage flats, a hand across a tired brow. On the way out, Zaria glances once more at the optic. The OK looks back with the wrong kind of confidence. She places the lid over the case and lowers it like a benediction withheld. Tomorrow, a tiny error means everything is wrong. The viewing stand filled the way pews do when a hymn is about to begin, quiet coats, folded hands, a low murmur that pretends to be nothing. Public affairs settled lenses and boom poles. A row of visiting officers took their places under the canopy faces, neutral in the heat. Rear Admiral Sterling Vance stood off to the side, not centered, not hidden, placed where a man can see angles. RSO Miles Jefferson lifted his laminated card and the range breathed with him. Line set, eyes and ears. A ripple of foam cups met earmuffs and clear lenses. Range is hot. The air tightened. Even the wind seemed to step back to a respectful distance. Zaria Ellington lowered herself behind the Barrett M82A1, the way a craftsman lowers a tool into its purpose, 30 pounds of steel and patience. Bipod-planted stock-fitted sling firm, but not proud. The sequence was posted on the board where any honest mind could read it: 3 static targets at 4, 6, and 800 meters, 3 movers at 650, 750, and 900. Ruiz took the spotting scope and found her breath like a metronome in the glass. Target 1, static 400, he whispered. Winds light quartering, right half value. Zaria's breathing found the square Dr. Park had drawn 4 in 4, held 4 out. She settled the reticle and let the mirage speak in small waves. Then the image thinned as if the world had been very slightly tugged. A shimmer stepped out of line with the mirage. The target swam not with heat, but with some other mischief inside the glass. Not wind, not heartbeat. Something in the optic's truth flexed where truth should not flex. She lifted her left hand off the pistol grip palm. Open fingers spread a quiet universal sign. Hold, she signaled to Ruiz and to Jefferson with that open hand never taking her cheek from the stock. Jefferson saw the signal and began to draw breath for the word nobody resents. But Pike, eager and immaculate, floated into the frame of the camera with a guiding palm and a stage whisper that mistook urgency for leadership. Where live, take the shot. The desert silence went from reverent to complicated. Zaria kept the rifle down the lane, but did not touch the trigger. Her fingers stayed long and straight. Her mouth was a single syllable forming the right word. Vance moved. He crossed the narrow distance between canopy and bench with the economy of someone who has rehearsed stopping a mistake. Not a leap, not a lunge, 3 precise steps that put his shoulder between the camera and the rifle. His right hand reached the big receiver as Jefferson's voice finally owned the air. Cease fire, range cold. Zaria's training met the order mid-motion. She cut the safety on, lifted her firing hand clear, and rolled her support elbow back to bring the muzzle down and off the line retention. Done exactly the way you teach it. Control the weapon, protect the lane, protect the people. Vance's reaching hand committed to the same act of lowering met the edge of the steel bench at the worst angle. There is a kind of sound that has no courtesy. It arrives absolute. The crack echoed against the berm, small and decisive as a snapped twig in a winter wood. Everything after that moved correctly and very slowly, the way good procedure makes even a crisis look like patience. Zaria kept the muzzle pinned at the deck and stepped back a pace in place. Ruiz froze. The candidate stepped behind the yellow line as if guided by one mind. Jefferson's palm stayed up steady as a lighthouse. Technicians put both hands on their chests so cameras would stop being hands for a moment and just be cameras. The Admiral's mouth thinned, not with anger, but the necessary discipline of pain held clean. He tucked his right arm against his body. The tremor in his hand, small as a wire in wind, had nowhere to hide now. Jefferson spoke low into his radio. Medics were already on the move from the shade. Zaria did not look at the stand or the cameras or Pike's white knuckles where a schedule used to be. She looked only at the rifle and the RSO. Sir, she said to the air between authority and safety, to the exact place where they must agree or fail, I've got the rifle. Range is cold and the weapon is safe. Confirmed, Jefferson answered, voice even. Weapon safe. Range cold. All stations hold. A hawk circled above the berm and wrote a patient circle in the sky. Someone in the viewing line exhaled like a confession. Dr. Evelyn Park appeared at Vance's side with a field kit and competence, her touch economical, her tone unstartled. It will need films, she said to no one in particular, meaning x-rays, meaning this was repair, not ruin. Zaria eased the Barrett onto its side, with the muzzle kept away from any living thing, her hands narrating every inch, for the benefit of anyone who needed to trust them. She stepped back again, shoulders square but not hard. In that short distance between her and the steel, the morning story rewrote itself. What had been about 6 impacts became about 1 command done on time, and a dozen eyes choosing to believe a script instead of panic. Pike found his voice at last and discovered it ought to be quiet. We can reset after medical clears. He stopped because nobody was listening to performance anymore. Vance, pale with a kind of dignity that owes its rent to self-control, met Zaria's eyes. Whatever lived in his gaze questioned, calculation something older kept its own counsel. He inclined his head a fraction, whether in thanks for the way the rifle had been kept safe, or acknowledgement of a fact he had seen first that the glass had lied. He did not say. Parks steadied his injured arm. Jefferson cleared a lane for the medics. The candidates watched the difference between theater and discipline revealed in one clean minute. The range stayed cold. The sun climbed. Silence, the good kind, returned. Not the silence of fear, but the one that follows a storm you chose not to have. Who's at fault, the crowd would ask by afternoon. Who saved whom the desert seemed to ask right now? The cameras had captured all the angles that matter, and none of the ones that can be edited. The badge on the spare optic winked once in the light, okay, as if confidence could be printed. Somewhere between the bench and the berm, the base's honor had already chosen a side. It would be a while before everyone else did. The medics wheeled a portable screen into the shade. Doctor. Parks' calm moved with them like clear water. Jefferson kept the line cold and the voices low. Performance had left the field. Procedure remained steady as a handrail. Zaria set the Barrett on its side, bolt locked open. Chamber flagged and stepped back so the truth could come forward without pushing past anyone. The tech from Weapons Harrigan, the kind who reads metal the way a chaplain reads faces, arrived with a torque driver and a bore sighting kit. He didn't posture for the cameras. He spoke to the rifle as if it could answer. We'll confirm the glass first. He mounted the spare optic, checked ring tension, then hung a collimator on the muzzle. The reticle met the grid and missed it high and right by a margin no honest zero would shrug at. He dialed clicks to see if the movement matched the marks. It did, but it started from the wrong home. Off zero out of the case, he said quietly. Not user error. Jefferson lifted the paper badge with tweezers. The OK looked official until it didn't gloss too fresh font, not base standard corner squared, where Sage Flats always clips at a bias. Under the sticker, the real signature block sat blank. No initials, no date, just the empty square where someone should have sworn that this glass was what it claimed to be. Zaria didn't look for a microphone. She looked for people. Ladies and gentlemen, she said to the stand, and the candidates and the few strangers who had come to see a show and found a lesson instead were pausing this event. We'll audit the checklist from optic to backstop and run the card full and clean. When we teach sailors to trust procedure, we owe them the courtesy of living it. A murmur moved through the canopy, not disappointment, but something older like recognition. Vance, pale but upright, inclined his head once. Park kept his forearm supported and his pride intact. Zaria turned to the class. Education short and simple. When in doubt, stop. A doubt is a flare, honor it. A cold range is not a failure. It's a promise kept. 30 seconds of caution buys 30 years of stories you still get to tell. Jefferson logged the anomaly, the off zero, reading the absent initials. Harrigan closed the hard case as if sealing a truth for transport. Pike found his schedule and folded it smaller. The heat settled. The wind admitted it had been part of the confusion and then went on about its day. Somewhere, a hawk rode another patient circle over the berm. The line would go hot again after the audit, not before. That was the honor of the place. But a question remained sharp as a fresh edge waiting just outside the shade. Who put that fake OK label on the audit moved the way truth prefers to move, page by page, signature by signature, with no appetite for applause. RSO Jefferson spread the paperwork on the briefing table, anchoring corners, with a pen, a torque driver, a coin. Harrigan traced serials on the spare optic against the log, then against supplies issue sheet, then against a maintenance ticket that had the right words in the wrong order. Where the checklist should have said, verify zero, sign, release it. Read like a press itinerary, prepare, present, impress. Commander Pike stood very straight as if posture could staple facts to his side of the story. Nothing unsafe happened. He offered tone crisp with the kind of confidence that survives on stage, but not in a ledger. We simply consolidated steps for a media-forward demonstration. Jefferson tapped the blank signature block with a fingernail that had known too many ranges to be theatrical. We don't consolidate initials, he said. We collect them. He slid the paper toward Pike. Whose sign-off is missing? Pike glanced at the empty square, then at the glossy OK sticker sealed to its memory. The pre-clear was verbal, he said. We've done that before on tight timelines. Harrigan shook his head once the way a machinist declines a myth. Not here, not on glass. Zaria let the silence hold long enough to mean something. This is on me too, she said, voice even. I should have refused to mount any optic without the right ink in the right box. The call to pause came late because I let Pace borrow authority. She lifted her eyes to the candidates as if speaking to both present and future. Don't do that. When the process asks for you, answer with your name. Pike's mouth flattened. We had an admiral waiting. We still do, Jefferson replied, not unkind. And he'll get the range he deserves, one that remembers who it is. The findings settled into the log off 0, confirmed out of case. Label not to base standard, signature absent, timeline advanced for filming. There were no villains, just a set of choices that looked tidy until they were asked to carry weight. Outside, the canopy flapped and then fell still. A breeze touched the firing line, as if to smooth a wrinkle the morning had made. Zaria placed her father's coin on the corner of the clipboard, a small stipend paid to the ledger of better habits. We reset, she said. We do it right. Ruiz, who had been taking notes like they were rations, glanced toward the medical tent where Park stood with Vance in measured conversation. The Admiral's right hand was bandaged. The tremor still drew a faint line in the air. Ruiz lowered his voice. Ma'am, the Admiral, why does his hand shake? Zaria followed his gaze. The question was fair and older than gossip, and the answer, if it was honor injury or both, would change what today meant. What is the real reason for that trembling hand? The base noon hum returned thinner now, as if the morning had taken a layer of noise with it. In the medical canopy, Dr. Park finished a rap as neat as a dress line. Rear Admiral Sterling Vance flexed his fingers once and let the wince pass through him without residency. When he stepped to the microphone, the cameras leaned in, but his voice belonged to the people on the range. I owe you clarity, he said. Years ago, a close call took part of my hand's steadiness and all of my tolerance for shortcuts. When I saw that glass misbehave, I moved to stop a bad shot. Lieutenant Commander Ellington executed weapon retention by the book. The injury is mine, and the responsibility for stepping into her lane is mine as well. He looked toward Zaria, not to confer virtue, but to recognize it. Your discipline preserved this range. Thank you. No flourish, no rescue narrative, just the public weight of a senior officer's apology. The candidates shifted, a soft rustle of shoulders, unburdening. The older guests on the stand nodded the way people nod when the words they were hoping to hear finally arrive. RSO Jefferson read the findings into the record. Spare optic off 0, out of case. Label not to base standard. Required initials absent. Timeline advanced for filming. He turned to Commander Pike with professional courtesy that did not hide its edge. Effective immediately, Commander Pike is relieved of range oversight duties. He'll complete SOP retraining prior to reassignment. A pause measured and merciful. Command appreciates his years of service and expects him to return to form where his skills fit best. Pike stood straighter than the moment required. He nodded once, as if to accept the sentence and its kindness together, then stepped back into a smaller circle of the canopy. Vance faced the class again. We will not dress procedure in show clothes, he said, and an older sailor on the rail murmured, Amen, under his breath. We will demonstrate what we demand, a full brief, full checks, full control. If the line goes cold because doubt shows up, we thank the doubt and start again. He turned to Zaria. Lieutenant Commander Ellington, the Navy, invited cameras here to see our best practices. I would like you to lead a reshoot under full SOP with RSO and medical in place. Teach by doing. Make the record reflect who we are. Zaria did not answer with a smile that could be edited. She looked to Jefferson first, and he tipped the laminated card as if it were a chalice. She looked to Ruiz, whose hands were steady on the scope. She touched the coin at her collarbone and felt the letter's single sentence warm like a pulse. Keep your rhythm. Then she met the Admiral's eyes and gave the only answer procedure. Understands, aye, sir. The canopy breathed. The range remembered its lines. Somewhere beyond the berm, a hawk stitched 2 circles together and called it one sky. The glass would be the right glass this time. The card would be read, not referenced. The cameras would witness a thing that does not bend for them. But in the quiet between the decision and the act, a question rose like heat from stone and hung where the mirage lives. Will Zaria dare to shoot again before everyone? With her past on her shoulders, The range gathers itself like a congregation. Jefferson lifts the card. The room lowers. Cold range. Brief complete. Checks touch metal sight sling, soul. Eyes and ears. Range is hot. Zaria settles behind the Barrett and lets silence become a tool. Ruiz steadies the spotting scope. Shot 1 static 400. Breath squares itself 4 and 4 held 4 out. The round lands clean. Tip MOA is a promise 1 inch at 100 yards becomes 4 at 400. Know your clicks, own your inch. Shot 2 static 600. The reticle floats, the mirage tilts. She answers with 2 gentle clicks. Tip mirage is the wind made visible. Read the angle, not your mood. Shot 3 static 800. Distance tries to bargain. She refuses hurry and lets the pause between heartbeats decide. Tip respiratory pause is free. Spend it. Shot 4 mover 650 left to right. She leads a quarter man width meets the target where it intends to be. Tip lead is a conversation place, your answer at the target's next word. Shot 5 mover 750 right to left. Wind freshens from the quarter. She halves the correction and trusts the math. Tip full value pushes, half value suggests, adjust accordingly. Shot 6 mover 900 appear disappear. She waits not for courage but for clarity. The shot breaks. Steel concedes. Tip don't rush truth. Follow through finishes what aim begins. 6 for 6 under 2 minutes with room to spare for dignity. Jefferson calls the line safe. The desert exhales. Zaria rises, resting a hand at her collar. Who saved the base's honor, she says, not asking. The correct procedure. She touches the small code beneath the cloth. EAG 7319ZE. My father's way of saying, keep your rhythm. When the world stares, let your rhythm stare back. She opens the folded letter and reads its last mercy. Honor is what you do when no one claps. She presses the challenge coin into Ruiz's palm. Keep it 1 week. Teach back the 3 safety principles, cold, hot, cease fire to every candidate. Then return the coin with your initials and your stories. The hawk stitches a final circle over the berm, and the record shows what it came to see, not spectacle, but a standard. In uniform or out of it, skill means little without 2 quiet guardians, discipline and truth. What you witnessed today wasn't a contest between people, it was a decision between habits. Zaria and her team didn't defeat an admiral or a rumor or a camera. They defeated the small carelessness that sneaks into systems when we hurry. Procedure spoken calmly, kept faithfully, saved pride, protected people, and taught the next set of hands how to come home. Keep your rhythm isn't just a family note, it's a way to live. In the heat of a range or the heat of an argument, call a cold range inside your mind, take 4 breaths, and let truth do its work. Honor is what we choose when no one claps, and standards are the inheritance we leave when our names are no longer on the roster. If this story touched you, especially those of you who've carried rank, raised families, or taught hard lessons, gently would you share 1 line below a tip for staying calm when eyes are on you? A simple rule that kept your home, your shop, or your unit safe. The younger ones read these comments. They learned from the steady hands. Thank you for passing the coin forward 1 voice at a time.